The wind carried a hollow moan to the pines, stretching across the edge of Black Hollow, a forgotten stretch of woods where the trees seemed to swallow light. Somewhere in the distance, a voice broke the silence. Faint, ragged, desperate. A cry for help. Officer Marcus Kane tightened his jacket against the chill, his breath visible in the cold night air. Beside him, K-9 Ranger's ears twitched. But when Kane reached for his partner's leash, Ranger froze. His gaze locked on the shadowed path ahead. Kane knew something was wrong, but he didn't know how far the darkness would reach. If you like stories like this, hit like and subscribe. There's more to come. The night air in Black Hollow had a weight to it, thick, damp, and lined with something unseen. Officer Marcus Kane's boots crunch against frost-hardened leaves, each step sounding loud in the unnatural quiet. He adjusted his flashlight and checked his radio. No response, only the static hiss that seemed to grow sharper with every heartbeat. Ranger, his K-9 partner, was unusually tense. His coat bristled, and his low growl trembled in the cold air. Kane gave the leash a reassuring tug, but Ranger didn't move. Instead, the German shepherd stared ahead, ears flat, muscles locked, as if some invisible wall had stopped him. Kane's breath came slow and steady. Try and keep calm. Ranger, we got a call. This way, he murmured. But Ranger simply stared deeper into the dark. The cry had been clear at first, faint but desperate, like a voice breaking after running through years of silence. Kane had been parked a mile up the gravel road when it reached him, a raw, human sound echoing faintly across the trees. It wasn't a woman screaming or a child crying. It was something harder to define, a plea that carried the weight of fear itself. Kane scanned the shadow trail ahead. The forest was dense here, trees bent like ancient watchers, their skeletal branches scratching at the night. A thin fog clung low to ground, curling in cold spirals around roots and rocks. Somewhere ahead, the path forked, and that's where Ranger stopped. Kane frowned. You know what? We go slow, he said under his breath, adjusting his flashlight beam. The path ahead was narrow, bordered by twisted undergrowth. As Kane moved forward, Ranger stayed rooted. The cry came again, closer now, muffled by the trees. Kane's stomach tightened. Ranger's low growl deepened, a sound Kane knew wasn't for show. Ranger was refusing to enter this place for a reason. Kane looked around. The trees were older here, trunks blackened with moss, their roots curling above ground. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, the faint shape of a cabin emerged, collapsed, worn, and swallowed by the forest. Its roof sagged, boards rotting away. A smell drifted on the cold air, mold, decay, and something metallic. Kane froze. His flashlight caught something near the door, a scrap of fabric, torn, darkened with what looked like dried blood. Ranger's stance stiffened. He growled again. Kane swallowed hard and stepped closer, hand resting on his service pistol. Every instinct told him to retreat, but Kane couldn't ignore the cry. Whoever was calling was close. Inside, the wind carried again, faint and broken. Help, please? Kane pressed his hand to Ranger's neck, feeling the rigid tension beneath his fur. Ranger's eyes stayed fixed on the cabin, unmoving. Kane's chest tightened. You're not going in, he muttered. Ranger's ears twitched again, then a low whine escaped his throat. Kane hesitated. He trusted Ranger's instincts, and Ranger was telling him something dangerous lived in that cabin. Kane stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Ranger pulled against the leash slightly, reluctant. Kane took the first step across the rotting porch, boards creaking under his boots. He swept the flashlight across the interior. The cabin was darker than the forest outside, almost unnatural. Broken furniture lay scattered, and the air reeked of mildew. Something wet glistened faintly in the flashlight's beam, a trail of dark liquid, leading deeper into the cabin. The crying was louder now. Kane stepped inside, every sense on alert. Ranger stayed at the threshold, head low, growl steady. Kane swallowed, moving forward. Ranger, cover me, he whispered, though his partner didn't budge. Inside, the cabin seemed smaller than it looked from outside. The walls were covered in peeling paint, warped by years of moisture. The floorboards sagged dangerously. Kane's flashlight beam landed on a figure huddled in the far corner, a woman, thin, trembling, wrapped in a torn blanket. Her face was pale, eyes wide and glassy, fixed on something in the shadows. She wasn't crying anymore, just whispering. Kane couldn't hear her words at first. Then her voice came clear. "He's here. Don't let him come back." Kane moved closer, his boots crunching softly. Ranger stiffened, the growl turning into a sharp bark. Kane's breath caught. Behind the woman, a shadow shifted. It was quick, fluid, gone before Kane could see its form. The air seemed to grow colder. Kane shone his light toward the movement, but found nothing, just darkness pressing against the edges of the cabin. The woman clutched her blanket tighter. Her voice cracked. They took him. They said they'd come back. Her gaze darted toward the cabin's back wall, where faint scratches marked the wood. Kane crouched beside her. Who took him? What happened? His voice was low, careful. She shook her head violently. I can't, they're watching. Her eyes welled up. Kane glanced at the window. Outside, Ranger was still frozen in place, not barking anymore, just staring. Kane's radio crackled softly, a sound he knew was static, then the faint voice of the dispatcher. Be careful, Kane, the hollow doesn't forgive. Kane looked at Ranger again. His dog refused to move forward. Whatever was in that cabin, Ranger knew, and so did Kane. But the woman's cry had drawn him in too far to walk away now. He stood, brushing dust from his jacket. Stay here, he told her softly, and stepped toward the back room. The sound of his boots against the floor echoed in the silence. Ranger's growl rose again, sharp and warning. Kane glanced over his shoulder. Ranger's eyes glowed in the dim light, locked on something behind him. Kane's own heart tightened. The cabin seemed to breathe. Somewhere deeper inside, the shadows moved. And whatever was there, whoever had cried for help, wasn't done yet. Kane's boots cracked softly against the warped floorboards as he edged toward the back room. Ranger remained at the threshold, unmoving, ears pressed flat against his head. His growl had deepened into something guttural, a warning Kane couldn't ignore. Still, there was that pull inside him, a promise that something inside the cabin needed him. The back room was darker than the front, the weak beam of his flashlight struggling to penetrate the blackness. The air grew colder here, colder than outside. Kane felt it crawl along his neck and down his spine, a chill deeper than frost. His breath came out in short clouds as he stepped forward. The doorframe to the room was warped, its edges cracked. As Kane pushed inside, the beam of his flashlight landed on something that made his stomach tighten. A small cot, stripped bare except for a stained blanket. Beside it, a wooden crate had been knocked over. Its contents, old rope, rusted tools, and a bundle of papers, lay scattered. The papers were yellowed and torn. Kane bent down, scanning them quickly. Strange symbols, crude drawings of people, something scrawled in jagged handwriting. One line stood out. The hollow remembers. The woman's voice came again, soft but desperate. Kane spun toward her. She stood just outside the doorway, clutching herself. Her eyes were wide and hollow, fixed somewhere behind him. Don't go in there, she said. Her voice shook. He doesn't want you here. Kane swallowed hard. Who? Who doesn't want me here? She flinched, her eyes darting toward the corner of the room. He, the thing. The one in the hollow. You shouldn't have come. You don't understand. Kane looked toward Ranger. His partner's gaze was fixed on something behind him. Something Kane couldn't see. The dog's body was rigid, muscles coiled like a spring. Kane's grip on his flashlight tightened. The sound came again, that low, muffled cry, deeper now, coming from somewhere in the cabin's core. It wasn't human. Kane knew it. He stepped deeper into the room. The cry grew louder. It wasn't words anymore, more like a sound of pleading, twisted into something unnatural. Ranger barked once sharply, then whimpered, his body trembling. Kane turned back toward the woman. We need to get her out. Now! She shook her head violently. No, you don't understand. You can't take him with you. Not like this. Her voice broke. They'll come for you. Kane glanced back toward the crate. Among the scattered papers was a small, weathered box. Kane's instinct screamed at him to leave it alone, but something about it pulled him forward. He picked it up. The wood was cold, slick under his gloves, as if it had been in the dark too long. Opening it revealed something Kane wished he hadn't seen. A small, carved figurine, shaped like a man with distorted features, bound in rusty wire. A faint metallic scent rose from it. Kane recoiled slightly. The woman gasped, stepping forward. "That's it," she said softly. "That's why he's here. That's why Ranger won't move." "Why? Who's here?" Kane demanded. She shook her head. "You won't believe me. He's been waiting for that box. He's been in the hollow a long time. And now," her voice faltered, "he knows you're here." A sudden noise echoed in the cabin, a low thud, coming from somewhere behind the crate. Kane spun, flashlight beam slicing through the shadows. Ranger barked again, louder this time, a sound that carried terror. The beam landed on the back wall. Deep scratches marred the wood, carved in a strange pattern. They were fresh. Kane's radio crackled to life again. The dispatcher's voice was faint, distorted. "Kane, get out before it's too late." Kane froze. "Who is this?" he asked. No reply. The static buzz in his ear, then cut. The woman moved closer to Kane, whispering urgently, "Don't open it. Whatever's in that box, it's tied to him. You can't fight him." Kane glanced at Ranger. The dog's stance was unreadable, but his growl had faded to a low rumble. Kane's gut told him Ranger was terrified, not of him, but of whatever was in the cabin. The cries from the back room were louder now, and Kane could feel them in his chest. Not sounds, but vibrations, as if something in the air was pulsing with dread. Kane stepped toward the back room. "Ranger, stay." Ranger's ears flicked back, but didn't move. Kane's boots echoed again as he crossed the threshold. Inside, the cry became clearer. Kane's light found something in the far corner. Not a person, but a shadow that moved with unnatural speed. It recoiled when the light hit it, vanishing into the deeper dark. The air grew heavier. Kane's chest burned. The cry turned into words, broken, almost a whisper. "Help me, please." The woman stepped forward suddenly. "Don't do it," she screamed. But Kane ignored her. He moved closer, reaching toward the shadow, toward whatever was there. Ranger barked sharply from the doorway, teeth bared. The dog's growl rose into a fierce, desperate sound. Kane felt the air shift, a pressure closing in on him. Then, without warning, the shadow lunged. Kane barely reacted in time, firing his flashlight beam toward it. The shape twisted away, disappearing into the wood. The cry stopped. Silence followed. Kane stood there breathing hard, flashlight beam trembling in his grip. Ranger moved slowly toward him, tail low, hackles raised. The woman was at the doorway, tears streaking her face. "It's too late," she whispered. Kane turned to her. "Who are you? What's happening here?" She shook her head. "I can't tell you everything. But the hollow, it keeps its promises. And tonight you're part of them." Kane's pulse raced. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin. The trees groaned like old bones. Ranger barked again, looking toward the door. Kane followed his gaze. Outside, through the broken window, something moved in the darkness. Something waiting. Kane stepped back toward the cabin's front room, his mind racing. The woman's words echoed in his head. The hollow keeps its promises. That was when he realized Ranger had not moved once toward the back room. Not because of her, not because of the cry, but because whatever was in there wasn't alone. And it was waiting for him. The air outside the cabin had shifted. The wind was sharper now, carrying the smell of wet earth, rust, and something foul. Kane's boots crunched in the frost as he stepped back toward the porch. Ranger stayed frozen at the doorway, eyes locked on the dark beyond. Kane could feel his own pulse hammering in his chest. The woman stepped beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have opened that box." Kane glanced at her, flashlight beam trembling in his grip. "Then tell me what's going on." She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. "That box belongs to him. The hollow doesn't just take, it marks. And when it marks someone, it keeps them. You walked into something you can't leave." Kane felt the weight of her words, but something deeper was pulling him forward. Not duty, not curiosity. Something heavier. From inside the cabin, The low cry began again. Softer this time, more urgent. Kane glanced toward Ranger. The dog was tense, growling low, refusing to move past the threshold. Kane looked back at the woman. Her eyes were wide, almost fearful of his next move. "I have to check," Kane said quietly. "If someone's in there—" The woman grabbed his arm, her fingers cold and trembling. "You don't understand. You're already marked." Kane froze. "Marked? By what?" She shook her head. "The Hollow. It doesn't give second chances." Before he could respond, the cry came again, louder now, filled with pain. Kane turned and stepped into the cabin, Ranger at his heel, but still hesitant. The shadows seemed to lean toward him, pulling him deeper. The air was heavier here, thick with moisture and the scent of rot. At the back of the room, the cot lay abandoned. The rope and tools from before were gone. In their place was something Kane couldn't comprehend. A figure kneeling in the dark, shrouded in shadow. The figure's head jerked upward. The cry became words, clearer now. "Please help." Kane stepped closer. The figure rose slowly. It was a man, his face twisted in agony, skin pale and marred with deep scratches. His eyes were wide, glassy, fixed on Kane with something that was not entirely human. Ranger barked sharply and backed away, teeth bared. Kane froze. The man's lips moved. "It's too late for you." Kane's breath caught. "Who are you?" The man's voice cracked, almost a whisper. "I was marked. The Hollow, it takes everything." His body shuddered violently. "You've been chosen." Kane stared, heart pounding. The figure stepped closer. Kane raised his flashlight higher, illuminating the man fully. But the light seemed to distort him, warping his face, stretching shadows across his features until he looked like something out of a nightmare. Then the man vanished. Kane blinked. The cry was gone. The room was empty. A sudden sound behind him made Kane spin. Ranger was barking furiously now, back pressed against the doorway. Kane's flashlight beam darted toward the noise. The woman was there, her face pale, staring at him with raw fear. "They're here," she said softly. "You can't leave. Not now." Kane's heart sank. "What do you mean?" Her voice broke. "The Hollow promised. And you heard it. You're part of it now." She stepped toward him, holding something wrapped in cloth. The carved figurine. "It doesn't matter if you fight. It doesn't matter if you run. It doesn't let go." Before Kane could respond, the ground trembled. Outside the cabin, something moved in the shadows. Kane's flashlight flickered. Ranger whined low, retreating toward the doorway. The air was thick now, heavier than before, as if the forest itself was leaning into the cabin. The woman pressed the figurine into Kane's hand. Her voice was barely audible. "Don't open it. The Hollow remembers." Kane's fingers tightened around the carved shape. Something deep inside him shifted. A sound came then, low and distant, growing louder. It was a chorus of cries, not human, not animal, but something that seemed older than the forest itself. Kane turned toward the doorway. Outside, the darkness was alive. The trees moved in ways they shouldn't. Shadows stretched and warped. Ranger barked once, long and fierce, before charging into the night. Kane froze. The woman's voice came again, trembling. "You have a choice, but you'll never walk away the same." Kane stepped toward the doorway, flashlight held high. The cries outside had become a roar. His breath came in short gasps. He glanced down at the figurine. In his hand, it pulsed faintly, warm despite the cold. Then the truth hit him. The Hollow wasn't just a place. It was something alive, and it had chosen him. A moment later, Ranger reappeared at the doorway, his body tense, teeth bared. Behind him was nothing, and yet everything had changed. Kane took one last look at the woman. She was staring past him, into the forest. Her eyes were empty. "Go," she whispered, "before it's too late." Kane stepped out. The cold air hit him, sharper than ever. Ranger stayed close, growling low. The forest swallowed them both. The cries faded into silence. But Kane knew they hadn't gone away. The Hollow had kept its promise, and so had he.